Andrew, what are the darkest secrets you learned in the CIA?
Oh man, there are some dark things you learn when you have a security clearance. I'll tell you that for sure. Some of it has to do with where missiles are pointed. Some of it has to do with the hierarchy of who lives and who dies in a terrorist network or a terrorist cell. And then, of course, a lot of it has to do with understanding your own real value to your own government. And when you start realizing that you're a disposable resource yourself, that gets pretty dark.
So when you say you're a disposable resource, what does that mean? You're worried for your job, you're worried for your life, or what?
You start to realize that you're the only one worried for anything about you, right? That's really what I'm talking about. So for example, the average intelligence officer will go through about $1.5 million worth of training over the course of their first 4 years of
Wow.
service. And that'll be fundamental training, intelligence training, all your driving, your shooting, whatever kind of first aid, field triage, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And you realize that, once you hit your first day on the job after about 9 months of training, all you are is like a $1.5 million receipt. That's it. And there's a million other people lining up behind you to be the next $1.5 million receipt. It's not like anyone's going to come save you if something bad happens. You're a disposable resource.
So is that how, do you feel like that because of the job? Or is that how you're made to feel because you're a disposable resource?
Well, what happens is you don't realize it until you get to be a little bit senior in rank. So I started as a field officer in 2007, and then I became a manager of field officers in 2010. So 2010, 2011 was kind of where I got to my place where I was starting to realize like, oh, I'm being taught to treat people who work for me like they are, they're resources, they're cogs, they're human resources. That's why we call them human resources, HR. It means that they're taking the human out and they're replacing it with a capability or a function or a skill set, right?
Yeah.
And when it comes to, undercover operations overseas, especially, the president always maintains what's called plausible deniability, which means the president always has the right to refuse, deny that you ever served for the agency that you actually serve for, whatever's in the best interest of national security. So once you kind of start putting those pieces together, it creates a very clear picture of the fact that you are important, but you're not as important as the movies maybe make spies out to be.
Well, I've got a question about that later, but I'll come to that. So what you're saying, you get into this maybe because you're excited or because it's your dream job, and you just realize someone's going to be maybe one day forced with a decision that, is too risky and you're gone. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, essentially. Like you might be the best person for a job. You might be really important. You might have been really successful, but the political winds have changed. You're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe something completely unrelated happens, right? Maybe you were a rock star CIA officer, and then you got into a car accident on your vacation at home, and now you're holed up in a hospital with a cast on your knee for like the next 6 months, whatever it might be, right? But the point is, nobody cares about you anymore because there's a whole line of resources behind you who can step in to fill your spot. It's a lot like being a professional athlete, right? We all think the professional athletes are stellar while they're on the field, but 6 months after they're taken off the field, you forget their name, right?
Shit. So have you ever been faced with a decision as a manager of on-the-field agents where it's like you have to make a decision and it's going to cost lives?
I've been fortunate that the only time I've ever been put in charge of making decisions about human lives, the probability of those lives being lost was low. So for example, if you're raiding a compound with that has terrorists on it, you're making the bet that your trained raiders are going to shoot straighter, faster, and with more accuracy than the terrorists who will be defending that compound. Plus you have the element of surprise. And then plus you have the advantage of superior technology. Superior technology is a huge thing. Just look at what's happening between Ukraine and Russia right now. So it's a massive force multiplier. So for me, when I've been put in those positions to make those life or death calls, the chances of death, the probability is very low. Maybe collateral damage at best, right? I have to worry about a rogue shot or an unexpected shot hitting somebody. But then we also have an evac plan to get any wounded out of the ground if that happens.
So you're in this interesting space in your life where, I just want to say some of the interviews I've watched of you have been great. I love the interview you and Lex did. And you're growing your brand. So there's a lot of shit you could say that would make you go viral. Like, how close to that line can you go?
So when it comes to the restrictions that are still levied on me for my lifetime secrecy agreement with CIA, I have quite a bit of flexibility, right? I can make alarmist statements. I can I can flat out lie, right? CIA has made it clear that the only thing that we are held legally culpable for is when we divulge secrets, national security secrets. It's specifically what they call something called sources and methods. Sources of espionage collection, methods of specific current clandestine collection. So we can talk about whatever we want, right? But to your point, there is also, every business owner has to employ their own ethical standard, right? Their own ideals when it comes to how they want to run their business, how they want to grow their brand. And I am of the opinion, especially when growing my business, that I want to grow my business very similar to the way that we grow a human intelligence operation. So I'm trying to stay away from alarmist rhetoric. I find that it's more valuable to talk about the truth than to talk about fiction. I find that, especially in our world right now, there are so many people growing their brand on the shoulders of rhetoric and anger and conspiracy theory and distrust, that it's much more valuable, speaking through the lens of lifetime customer value, if you can be the person who's a balancing voice, a steadying voice, a nonpartisan voice.
See, if I go there a bit more, because I think that's even more your paradox. Because you know truths that aren't alarmist, I'm assuming, you know truths that aren't alarmist, that you could speak the truth about, that would make you viral, when all these people out there are making false alarmist statements and go, is that not frustrating to you?
Well, it's interesting. I would say that a big part of what you're running into now, Rob, is my own lack of experience as a business owner and as a marketer, frankly, right? Whenever making your first dollar, for most of us, is kind of like an accident. It's why we celebrate. We're like, oh shit, somebody paid me. Like, this is awesome, right? And then you start getting a little bit better at it and a little bit better at it. But you realize after you've made, you made your first $100,000, you realize there's a lot more money out there and that you just don't know how to get to it. You don't know what's the best way to market, what's the best way to market online, how do I take advantage of this opportunity? How do I take advantage of media? How do I make the best cold traffic advertisement? How do I advertise differently on Twitter versus on YouTube, right? You start to realize just how much you don't know. And so for me, there's a lot of it to your point, there's a lot of your idea of making non-alarmist statements that would cause my content to go viral. That's what I'm trying to tap into now, because I don't know how to do that myself. More experienced marketers, more experienced business people, I think they see it clearer than I do, but they're building their own businesses, not mine. If you like this short clip, make sure you click here to see the next clip, or here to see the full podcast episode.